our esteemed panel of guests this afternoon. I'm joined by retired Colonel Dinny, who is a defense expert, and I'm also joined by former Ambassador Veena Sikri. Good afternoon to both of you. Thank you for taking our time and joining us over here. I'll first go across to you, Mr. Dinny. How do you look at what exactly transpired yesterday when Iran had unleashed around 200 missiles on Israel? And now, of course, the warning and the counter warnings are coming from both sides, from Israel and from Iran. And from here on, we can only expect that it's going, as far as the offensive is concerned from both ends, that's going to escalate. How do you look at the developments that have taken place yesterday, Colonel Dinny?
Ma'am, as I see it, this is not something which is totally unexpected. I would rather say that the way Israel went about, targeting Hamas first for the first about 10 months since October 7th, and then shifting north towards Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah, the pager bombs, then neutralizing the chief, then in the meanwhile also targeting the Hamas chief in Iran. So it was just that Israel was systematically eliminating all the non-state actors, which were proxies of Iran, in a systematic manner. So I think it was just a matter of time when Iran had to do something to stay relevant. They did the same thing during in April this year, if you remember. That time also they had carried out these attacks, basically drones and some ballistic missiles and all. But that time also it was not very effective on ground. It had more of a symbolic value. Even now, if Iran would not have done what they did, look at where Iran would stand in front of their proxies. Israel is going all out against Hezbollah. They're going all out against Houthis. They're going all out about Hamas. And Iran, their masters, are not doing anything. So they had to do something. And I think Israel also, in a way, knew that they will do something. And I think the way it has panned out, as of now, it doesn't seem that there has been too much of casualties on ground. So I kind of expected this to happen. And now the reaction from Israel will further define how this conflict is going to pan out. So I feel that there will be a restriction by the US to have a calibrated attack from Israel, and not to go all out, like what they've done in Lebanon and all. I don't think that will happen. They will go with a systematic targeting of some military installations or an oil field, or maybe taking out some IRGC commanders. So I feel it will be a calibrated response by the Israelis.
Okay, let me take that question across to the former ambassador joining us this afternoon, Veena Sikri. Ms. Sikri, how do you look at what exactly happened yesterday? Like Colonel Dinny was explaining it, that it was almost in expected lines. But what happens here on? Because at one end, of course, we see how Israel has garnered the unflinching support of US, UK, Australia, France, Japan. It only goes on to say that what Mr. Jaishankar was just saying some time ago, that the international responsibility when it comes to humanitarian crisis, that should not be forgotten. But when you see all these nations coming together to support Israel, do you think that element has been missed in the process?
I think that yesterday's attack on Israel was a definite escalation in this ongoing battle that is there, in the regional battle between Israel on the one hand and Hamas and Hezbollah and Houthi, all of whom are supported by Iran. The escalation was, first of all, on technological issues, because they used hypersonic missiles for the first time, and this is definitely a technological escalation. The earlier time when Iran had attacked Israel, they had focused on relatively isolated military sites all around Israel, and this time the focus was definitely on highly populated areas and even on the Mossad headquarters, as you had mentioned yourself. So I think there was a definite attack and
yes,
escalation technologically and in the choice of targets. I think the attack by Iran was very much expected. USA had announced that it was going to happen. They had been following it, and they announced that it's going to happen. I think with the escalation of the targeting and escalation of the technological use of hypersonic missiles, we've seen a coming together of Israel supporters, which is UK, USA, Albanese from Australia, and all the others who have come together and said that they're going to support Israel and they will not allow Iran to escalate it further. Now, we have seen that Israel had great successes in targeting the Hezbollah leadership. Nasrallah was killed. And then they have now mounted a ground offensive into Lebanon, targeting villages near the border where Hezbollah has kept their missiles and where they have dug tunnels. You've shown visuals of how they've dug tunnels, and these tunnels have now been accessed by the Israelis, and they're going to try and stop
Yes.
or disarm the Hezbollah, just as they have been trying to disarm the Hamas in Gaza. Now, I think this counterattack, the ground offensive by Israel will continue. I don't see them stopping it. But we have seen the statement from the IRGC, from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran. We've seen their statement that they think this is a very strong attack. They may not continue depending on what Israel will now do. So I think that this attempted escalation by Iran, plus the strong support by Israel's allies, I do not see a further continuation, but I do see Israel continuing its ground attacks into Lebanon to disarm and the villages and complete the disarmament of Hezbollah, so that they cannot continue to attack Israel from their tunnels and from their attack installations near the border in Lebanon.
Absolutely, Ms. Sikri. But Colonel Didney, how does this going to impact the global balance when we're talking about the Middle East? This particular war is going to affect all of us in some way or the other. And especially since we are only all talking about how the escalation is going to increase here on after how Iran started it off yesterday against Israel. Please take us through what is your views on how it is going to lead to a global imbalance of sorts.
See, it's just not about this particular attack. If you have to see the since October 7th last year, the kind of conflict which is there in the Middle East, it has affected all of us in many ways, in the sense of the energy supplies, and the very fact that there is instability in Middle East is a cause of worry. But what surprises me the most is that although Israel has been previously engaged with a lot of conflict with many other Arab states, this time, however, Saudi Arabia, UAE, they have not come up openly militarily against Israel till now, which shows that there is some sort of even, like, for example, Egypt and Jordan, even this particular attack, Jordan has also supported Israel in the form of that, by allowing the US and the French military to operate in their airspace and all those things. So what I'm trying to say is that increasingly Iran seems to be isolated in this conflict which is happening right now. Only people who are now supporting is Russia and China. However, Russia has its hands full in Ukraine conflict, so therefore Russia involvement here is unlikely.
Yes.
And China, as we all know, I don't think they're going to get involved themselves here in this particular. So it is most likely that with the elections happening in US, and there is a great stake for both Republicans and Democrat party if with regards to Israel. Whatever happens to Israel, there's a huge impact there. So I feel that till elections are on, and once the result comes, this conflict is likely to escalate. But after that, after elections are over and we have a president in the US, we may see a peace in this area. So therefore, till that time, whatever these kind of conflict escalation which happens, it has to be kept at some kind of level in which it can be managed. So, like what Veena ma'am also was mentioning, that if it is maintained at such a level, that is fine. But if at all it goes into another level of escalation, then it definitely for all of us it matters, because we have a huge diaspora in Middle East. If Saudi Arabia or UAE gets sucked into it, then it becomes a big issue for us, and not only the energy concerns, but other issues also come into play. But as of now, my take is that till the elections of US is completed and we have a new president of US, this conflict is likely to stay in this manner. After that, we may see a situation in which some sort of a ceasefire at least is happens in this particular area.
Okay. Ms. Sikri, I'm just going to say what Mr. Jaishankar has said, the External Affairs Minister. He has called upon the warring parties to respect humanitarian law, and the importance of communication should not be underestimated. Now, while India has issued advisory, they are of course worried about Indians living in Israel and Iran. But given the present circumstances, do you think there is any process of dialogue? Because it was only yesterday that the Turkish President Erdogan, who is also a NATO ally, said that the UN must try and use the force against Israel to stop the offensive. How will this perhaps reach a climax of sorts? Will there be a dialogue process? Do you think there is a need for an intervention from the international communities?
Well, the point is that the UN has proved itself very weak in these circumstances, and the Security Council is completely deadlocked due to the use of the
Yes.
veto. So I do not see whether the UN will be able to do anything much, despite the regular condemnations that the UN Secretary General is issuing. I think that the show of support for Israel is very significant, and the quiet support without any statements, even by countries like Saudi Arabia, is there. Our Prime Minister has already had a discussion with Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel and has emphasized to him the question of dialogue and peace, and if possible to have some kind of ceasefire. But I think this is very important. Maybe our Prime Minister may also speak at some time to the leadership of Iran. I don't know whether that is on the cards, but that could happen, because I think that this kind of escalation should definitely be brought down as much as possible, and the end of the terrorist groups, like whether it is the Hezbollah, whether it is the Hamas, whether it is the Houthi, these terrorist groups cannot be allowed to operate with impunity as they have been. Whether it is Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, or Houthi in Yemen, they've been operating with
Yes.
impunity. They take over the civilian areas, they use the civilians as shields, as human shields, and continue their terrorist activities. I think there's got to be action taken against such groups, and they've got to be a realization that such terrorist groups cannot be allowed to continue their activities. So I think this has to be built into any ceasefire, any discussions that countries who are supporting such terrorist groups, whether it is the Qatar supporting Hamas or Iran supporting Hezbollah and Houthi, all this has to be taken into account when coming to a talk of a ceasefire and coming to a talk of a peaceful resolution of the situation. At the moment, I think with this strong attack by Iran yesterday, escalated attack, greater numbers of missiles used, maybe that while Israel will continue its ground offensive, there may not be any further escalation of that. The strong support for Israel from the allies of the West will prevent any further escalation by Iran, I think. And in the meanwhile, there has to be an effort to bring in the dialogue and bring in talking to all the sides. It's an era of dialogue and diplomacy, and this must be called into play now.
Absolutely, Ms. Sikri. Thank you for your time. And also, Colonel Dinny, for taking our time and joining us over here at Mirror Now. Thank you, Ms. Veena Sikri.